We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. All right, BraveCo men, this week I have some real BraveCo men with me, and it's group 32. So these guys have been with me for almost a whole entire year, some of them over a year long. And man, it's just been so fun to run with each and every one of these guys. And we wanted to do this podcast really just to give each man like a real inside look to what BraveCo does and how you can, grow, run with guys, change your life. And so we're going to kind of dive into the good, the bad, the ugly of, what BraveCo is, what we offer, but also these guys' lives and where they're at and what's really happening. And but before we do that, I just want to introduce each guy. I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking up like this because they're on a big screen. And so if you're watching this and you notice that I'm not staring you down like I am right now, it's just because I'm looking at these guys. So just bear with me. But I just want to introduce each one of these guys. Dan Grotberg is just a really incredible friend of mine. And he's been a leader here at BraveCo for quite a while. MJ Salvatore, MJ's just such a solid dude. And MJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were first thinking about BraveCo, I think that you had some major hesitation. If I remember, I was telling my wife I was telling Tim, and that I think that you were going to sign up, and then you're like, I'm not sure. And then I think I talked you back into it, like not talked you in, but just explained it a little bit more. Is that true?
That's 100% facts. 100%
so
facts.
I'm going to circle back around on that and find out if your investment was worth it. So we have William. So William, where are you from?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Yeah. And, man, it's just so good to have you on here. Byron Crisp, bottom left of my screen. Byron, is a guide for us as well. And, Byron actually won Man of the Year. So Byron graduated. Did you guys all graduate? Forgive me there's just a ton of guys. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So all these guys have been with us for a year. And Byron won the Man of the Year award. And I'm going to have him share just a little bit about, why he actually won the Man of the Year award. It's because his life was so jacked up and he fixed it. So he did some work. And Byron's just an incredible leader, like all of these men are today. And it's so cool to have all you guys in one group, because I'm looking at this group going, oh, dang. Like you guys had a really powerful small group that just literally, we just put you guys together. Like we didn't think through like strategically. We didn't know you guys when we put you together. So just a bunch of savages here. Lewis. So we have Lewis here. Lewis is from England. And again, I've spent a lot of time with Lewis. He's also a guide, which means he leads other groups and other men for BraveCo as well. I know Dan does that. Byron does that as well. And, so I spent a lot of time with Lewis. He's trying to come to Texas. So if there's anybody from the embassy, American Embassy, listening to this, could you please just lighten up a little bit on Lewis? He's a good guy. He's solid, and we know that that's true. And then, of course, we have Chris Boyd. And Chris, I don't know where you're from. Can you just tell me where you're from? And
yes,
yeah.
Right now, Grapevine, Texas. So Lewis is hopefully going to be joining. Our powers are going to come together here in DFW Metroplex.
Bro, I love it. Yeah, that's awesome. So fellas, thank you so much just for carving some time out of your week to do this. And really, this whole entire thing started, like BraveCo started because of our heart to see men restored back into their original design, right? And we've talked about it so much on this podcast. I talked about it, last week with Steve Weatherford, and just about the state of the union for men right now. And men are struggling. And I'm not like trying to blow it up. I'm not like trying to even be dramatic. Like the non-dramatic state of the union for men is that they're suffering. Marriages are suffering. Men are struggling with anxiety, depression, erectile dysfunction, because of pornography. They're addicted, and then on one other side, you have some men that are doing good. But for the most part, a lot of men are really struggling and suffering. And when we were originally starting to build out, like, how do you help men? When I was thinking through, like, I really want to help men, there's like a 9 billion ways that you can help men. Like, I can just have a podcast and do that, and that's great. Or we can do yearly retreats somewhere. Or, it's a really complicated thing when you actually think about, like, there's just an infinite amount of options. And when I started really thinking about it and processing with the close men in my life, at some point we realized, like, unless you do discipleship, unless you do like real life on life, week by week discipleship, everything else just feels like a weak attempt. Maybe I could say that. It's like good, right? It's okay. Like a podcast. I do a podcast and I listen to podcasts and they're good. And I do retreats, and retreats are good. It's like a really good shot in the arm. I do conferences, and conferences are good. Like conferences are cool because again, it's like you get really super hyped and you get to hang out with a bunch of dudes and kind of reevaluate your life. But I also have seen what happens when you only do conferences, right? And I see people that just go to conferences over and over and over. That's my life. Like I've been a pastor for over half of my life. And so I've seen that. And even church, right? Like if I could be so honest to say that at some level, like people go to church their whole entire lives, but they're not necessarily discipled, where they are doing life on life relationships. There's accountability, there's real deep friendship and connection, and then a pathway where we are all moving forward. And so, kind of when we really got down to it, we decided like, man, we've got to, everything that we do has to revolve around discipleship because that's the way forward. And so this last year and a half's been friggin' so wild because for those of you that are new, listening to our BraveCo podcast or just kind of new to what we do, like last year we did 2 men's conferences, we did 3 5-day challenges. But the biggest thing that we did is we built out this discipleship course, this year-long discipleship course that has 4 phases in it. I'm just going to brush through this really fast, and then we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty. The first phase is the foundations of masculinity, which we call FOM. And that takes you all the way through what does it mean to be a man, how to work through pain, right? Because when you start to really look at it, everybody's got pain. Every man has pain. Every woman's got pain. And life is just full of pain. I'm not being negative Nancy. At some point, your parents are going to die. At some point, your friends aren't all going to work out. Like we have to have a real plan to work through pain, or you just stuff it, right? How to set healthy boundaries. So we go through this whole 12 weeks on that. The next 12 weeks is sexuality and relationships, where we really dive into, how to build healthy and whole relationships. But in order to do that, you need to actually look at how you lived a relationship. Like what was your home life like? What was your own personal, what do you believe to be true about yourself? The cycles that you live in. So a lot of guys get free from pornography and addictions inside of the sexuality and relationships portion because they're starting to pay a close attention to, how they're managing their relationships. How do you feel cared for? Do you know how to meet your needs in a healthy way? That type of stuff. Moving on, we go through a prosperity and wealth phase. And then finally, the last phase is leadership. So how to lead yourself well, and then how to lead others. So these men, group 32, have gone through all 48 weeks of that. And they have sacrificed so much to literally to put a year of their life, to be really intentional with an entire year of their life, to meet in a small group once a week, to jump onto a watch party if they wanted to. So all these guys have access to me every single week. And some of them have access 2 times a week to me. So if you're leading a group, I meet with all the leaders who want to, as well as these guys are able to jump in and just ask any question they want. So they have done like this extensive, intensive course. And yeah, so again, guys, congratulations on completing that. But more importantly, I mean, I would love for you guys maybe just to talk a little bit about, and anyone can start. Maybe Byron, will start with you because I already mentioned you were the man of the year. But can you tell me, like, where were you coming in, and how did you feel about starting BraveCo? Like when you first started BraveCo, what were your thoughts? And then, how did you start to overcome some of that stuff? So go for it, Byron.
Wow, that's a big question, Jay. So coming into this, I knew BraveCo was coming up. I've been following you and your dad for years. And so when the 5-day challenge showed up, I signed up right away. I was like, all right, I'll get into this challenge, get going on that and see where it takes me. And then I guess my core problem was I knew I needed to change. I had no tools to do it with. That was my issue. I knew my life needed to change. I knew my marriage needed to change. I knew I needed to be able to look at myself in the mirror and take a good hard look at myself and say, what's wrong with me? And just couldn't do it. I couldn't look in the mirror and be honest with myself. That was my biggest challenge coming into this. So the 5-day challenge actually was really tough. I just found it just stretched me so much. And then when it came time to sign up, I was like, I talked to my wife, it's like, I get this chance to do this thing for a year. Should I do it? And she's like, yes, you should do it. So I signed up, like, all right, I'm in, I'm going for it. And anyways, it was a ride. Like, this was a scary ride for me. Like you ask any one of these guys on here, the first month, I don't think I said 5 words in any call, any night. I was like, no one needs to know me. And as I get into this, like, I was like, these guys actually care. Like, these guys actually want to see me be a better version of myself, to see me get healed, to see me become like a real guy, like a real man. And so that's where the journey started. And like, it was just nuts. It was just a crazy up and down and sideways and backwards journey that just took me from being such an unhealthy man to being a guy that's not scared to dive into any situation now, not scared to look at himself in the mirror. I'm not passive about life anymore. I just like attack life, head on now. So that's what my journey starting into BraveCo was.
It's crazy because it sounds so cliche, right? Like, that's what I would say if I was going to make like a marketing packet, is like, men, do you want to attack life? Do you want to be able to look in the mirror and like yourself? Do you want to be able to wake up in the morning and feel proud of the man that you are? Like, right? Like, I could just do that off the top of my head. And so when guys listen to that, they're like, man, what was like the turning point for you, Byron? I mean, cause you're in small group, and I know what you mean. Like, it can be really painful to show up week after week and be like kind of terrified that at people getting to know you and even looking at your weaknesses. Let's be honest, not even secrets, right? Like, even if you don't have secrets, but just your weaknesses, guys finding out like, oh, your marriage sucks. That's a freaking crappy thing to have to face. Like, my marriage really sucks and I don't feel like a man because I don't know how to fix that. Right? Like, what was kind of the turning point for you, Byron, where you're like, I'm going to go after this? Was it the guys like kind of winning you over with their vulnerability, or the week to week, like, consistency? What was it for you?
I would say a little bit of everything there. The week to week consistency was really big. Building relationships with other men. Like, I've been isolated for years. I don't really have a lot of close men friends that I can rely on, that can speak into my life. So building relationships with guys here in this group that could speak into my life and that I would allow them to speak into my life made a big difference. And, and then it all came to a head. I had an instance where one night I called Dan, and I was just like the poor guy had to listen to me like cry on the phone for like 10 minutes. I was like I couldn't even get like speak. He just listened to me cry. And it's like, I'm in a mess. And I think part of that was just being so vulnerable and so open that, it gave me the courage to, actually have some hard conversations with myself, with my wife. And that's when things started to turn. When I finally, was able to be truly vulnerable, that's when I found that I could be truly strong, and things really broke from there.
What was it like the first time that you were like trying to be really vulnerable with your wife? And we're going to let some of these other guys open up, but I think that's such a common thing right now for men is, right, they're looking at their marriage and going like, man, my marriage is not in a great place. And part of it is, I just don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to really show up. Like, Byron, what did it look like, especially with your wife going like, no, you need to do BraveCo? What was that journey like between you and her?
Man, that was scary. If I'm going to be completely honest, it was terrifying to be completely vulnerable with my wife. It was terrifying to admit where my failures were, where my weaknesses are, and to say, I know I need to do better, but I'm not sure how this is going to look coming out the other side. And, it came right down to the two of us going for a drive, grabbing a coffee, and sitting at a park in the car with the doors locked, and like, we're going to talk this out. And like, there was a lot of, on my side, there was a lot of tears, a lot of just opening up and saying, I'm scared, and I don't know how to move forward from here. I'm scared that if I'm honest, you're going to, walk out. Like, this is going to be the end. But like I said, like as I became vulnerable, I started to find strength.
Yeah.
And
I think that's so important, right? Is that you're able to express your fear to her and go like, I'm afraid that you're going to leave. Like, that's the ultimate fear, right? Like, I'm afraid that I'm just going to be completely rejected, that you're going to be out of here, and I'm going to be like in this men's program with my pants half down. Like, I finally got vulnerable. I'm finally kind of pressing in. I'm afraid I'm going to lose it all. That's real.
Yeah. That's the risk.
Gosh dang. It's kind of fun that you're in a group of such solid men. And I know that because I know these guys, and some more than others. But when I look at it, especially looking at your group now, I didn't know that these guys were all in your group, Byron. It's fun that you got the man of the year, but like the men of the year is this group, right? You've got a group of studs behind you, like helping to pour into you. And that's like brought you to a whole new level.
Absolutely. You don't get man of the year on your own. There's just no way. There's just no way.
And honestly, it's what every man wants. I was talking to Steve Weatherford, and he was talking about how to become a dangerous man, right? Like, we were spelling that out. And I was telling him, like, to me, the easiest, quickest way is to not do it on your own. Like, if you're going to live 5 lifetimes, right? If you're going to live as long as Noah lived, okay, yeah. Like, you got 900 years to freaking work on it. But if you don't want to have to, try and fail a million times, like, get with a group of guys who are already going in a great direction, who already have momentum, attach yourself to them, and you get their success. Like, that is the quickest, easiest, although it's challenging. There's nothing quick and there's nothing easy about it, but it is the quickest way to get to where you want to go. Hands down. William, just share a little bit about, like, what were some of the challenges for you in BraveCo? How did you come in? Did you come in like good to go? I know some guys came into BraveCo, their life wasn't necessarily a mess or anything like that. How did you come in?
I came in by accident. I was on Facebook and saw the 5-day challenge and was just like, heck, why not give it a shot? Like I've followed Bethel. I've seen your stuff. I've seen your dad's stuff. And I was like, hey, maybe I'll get something out of this week, not realizing that 5 days in, I'd be sitting there like crying and like realizing like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I've packed into myself that I don't want to share with people. And like going into it, I thought I was okay. Being completely honest, I was like, hey, like this seems like it'd be a great journey, great opportunity. But coming into it and beginning going through like the masculinity phase. And then I think for me, it was more like the sexuality and relationship phase that like smacked me really hard. Because I began to realize like listening to these guys every week, like open up and be vulnerable. Like that was not really a place there I was. But at times I would hold back quite a bit because I was like, I'm so afraid of sharing. A lot of it just being from past relationships with other men that just went sour and like being vulnerable with them and like my family and my brothers, my dad, like not being the most emotionally available. So coming into it, like one of the biggest struggles was that vulnerability aspect. And I think a lot for me was the insecurity of just like, if I'm open with these guys, like what's going to happen? Like, what are people going to think of me? And it's like, even opening up with my wife was terrifying as well. Cause I was like, oh gosh, like there's sides of me that she's never known and she's never heard of. And like going through these phases and deep diving into pain from past relationships and sexual experiences, I was just like, what's going to happen here? Like, I'm going to get on this call and just like, tell these guys like, oh yeah, like I have all of this past sexual hurt from being a homosexual man and being used and abused and like pulled into pornography. Like most guys nowadays don't want to talk about that type of stuff, like that's at true. All. But to come into this and have these guys just be like, hey, like cool. And then I know for me personally, like MJ was a big support in that. And like being able to talk about that with him and like walk through similar experiences, like really pulled me out of that. And like, to go now forward, like walking in confidence and like walking in an ability to have relationship with men that I was like so shut off from it's a huge win. Like I look at it now and I look around the relationships that I've built where I'm at, the relationships I've built with these guys, the relationships that I've like helped restore and like God's helped restore with my own brothers and my father, like has been incredible. And yeah, I'm like, it was just a wild experience.
Wow, that's crazy. Unpack for me just a little bit. Like, how did your wife, like, how did she navigate through this? And was it pretty easy for her or what was her kind of mode through this?
So I think at times it was difficult. Other times it was fine. She does counseling. So me kind of coming up with this stuff, she was like, oh, cool. Like, let me see how I can kind of help you, but just be your wife. I think a lot of the difficulty came when a lot of like the sexual pain and the sexual history started coming up. And for that, she got really nervous about it and very like uncertain, especially like coming from a gay lifestyle. For her, she was like, that's a complete unknown territory for me. And walking through that. So there was a lot of tough conversations on the couch at like 1:00 in the morning and like breakfast conversations, bedroom talks, just like walking through everything that I'm processing, but also having her support in the sense of like, hey, you need other men. Like you need to open up to the BraveCo guys about this. Like I am your wife. I'm here to support you, but like men need to walk you through this journey too. So yeah,
man, I love that. You know, when Lauren and I got married, of course I had 3 kids from my previous marriage and had gone through divorce and stuff. And one of the things that she said to me kind of stuck in reflection. She said, I can't remember how many years after we'd been married, we had this conversation. She said, I felt confident in marrying you, knowing that I wasn't going to be the one that was going to have to bear the burden. If you weren't doing well, you had other men in your life, right? Like, so I have my dad and Danny Silk and like these other guys that I built relationship with. And she was like, I always felt comfortable, not that we weren't going to get over our head, but that we were never going to get into a spot where our community couldn't help solve that. And I think that's one of the things that my dad modeled really good for me growing up was I always saw him, you know, reaching out to these other guys. Right. And so growing up, it was just kind of second nature for me to have somebody that I can, you know, pull into my foxhole. And of course we have our wives and they're an incredible strength, right? Like sometimes my wife has like the insight of God on my life, like what I need. And sometimes she just has better instincts than I have about what the kids need or what's going on or how to solve a problem. But a lot of times, just knowing that she's going through crazy stuff or I'm going through crazy stuff and there's somebody else there that's shouldering that load is so massive. So I could see how, man, you go live a homosexual lifestyle, which I didn't previously know that. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just showing people how authentic this conversation is. Like I didn't pre-set up and go, tell me all your stories. But having that, right, that's a scary thing in a marriage, right? It's a scary thing for it's unsettling, especially when you start going through your sexual past. Like a lot of couples are really afraid of that kind of stuff because, man, is it going to bring up the past? Is it going to, well, we're already in the past, right? Because if you went through that stuff and you didn't clean it up, it's not like you buried it and it's dead. It's like on some way, shape or form, it's still affecting your life. How are you going to get the confidence to really unpack that, not doing it alone? So, man, that's massive. Yeah, that's massive. And where do you feel like you're at? So you did a year of BraveCo. Where do you feel like you're at now? Like, give me like the 411 on kind of your marriage and your life.
Marriage and life, definitely a lot stronger marriage wise. Being able to be vulnerable and open with her has like helped our relationship go forward. But we were in the process of finishing up phase 4 and going through legacy and leadership. And my wife ended up by telling us that we were pregnant. So going into fatherhood, our baby's due in April. So that's kind of the exciting part of going through this entire year and like being in that previous lifestyle, never thinking I would be a father, never thinking I would be any type of example of a man to somebody, to now like looking at the future of what's ahead, to like be able to be a father to my daughter and to like show her what that looks like, what a godly man looks like is so exciting. And then just being able to see like everything else that God's opened us up to, like marriage wise, and just like having those conversations and being able to just deep dive into things and not holding back, where I think prior was like a lot of hold back.
If I was smart, I would have interviewed each one of you before I did this and then like coached you on what to say so that guys would be like real inspired. It doesn't get any better than that, right? Of like, man, I look over and Tim's almost crying on the couch. He put his head down, rubbing his eyes. I mean, that's why we do this, right? That's worth the fight. So, each one of you guys gave a year of your life and $1,000 to, to work through stuff in your life, get some tools and come out on the other side. And the other side of that is, man, I'm having a child. Like, congratulations. I can't even believe that.
Thank you. It's crazy.
What's interesting is guys struggle for years with their past. They struggle for years with, especially like same-sex attraction, homosexuality type of stuff. And, my story is no secret with oral sex with guys and stuff. And it's just so cool to watch what can happen when you build healthy relationships and you really go after the stuff in your life. Like, it unlocks you and gives you the capacity to do stuff that you never thought you'd do. So, William, congratulations, man, on not just your daughter, but like really pressing in and going through hard stuff to get to this just phenomenal place. So, yeah, I love it. MJ, let's circle back a little bit, bro. Because I do remember having that conversation with you in the very beginning. You were like so gung-ho, you're ready to go. And then I remember what you told me. You're like, man, I just don't know that I could fit it into my schedule. And I'm super busy right now. I'm doing a bunch of training. And I was like, no, that's cool. Here's the thing. I don't have anything in my body like to shame somebody or to be like, oh, you're going to miss out. But I think I told you like, bro, I think it's going to be worth it for you. Like, so anyways, bring us through that process a little bit and then like where you're at today.
Absolutely. So yeah, in full transparency, that schedule was busy, but total cop out. Cause I was just like, I don't want to unload the worst of the worst. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just didn't want to do that. And, I think for me coming into this entire program, I was coming in out of a season where all of my relationships with all of the brothers in my life and the church that I was involved with were completely stripped away. And there was not a lot of follow through with discipleship, to what you had mentioned earlier, like in the church that I was a part of. And that was a piece that was lacking, that I was so desperate for. And I always found it really easy to just connect with a lot of different people, but that authentic, genuine brotherhood, there was a gap, and there was just something missing. I was like, I shared deep parts of my story, but there was never any unraveling of the roots. And I think that's what really drew me in to going through the course when I finally decided to, bite the bullet and, go for it. And a lot of that sparked from the 5-day challenge, because I saw all of these different guys, the 5 guys that were part of this group. There was something special that was happening during that first 5-day. And I'm just like, going Facebook Live and talking through things. I was like, this is great. but people were responding to that vulnerability. And there was something with these men that I saw. And I was like, I really want to do this. But there was just that, it's a push and pull, right? Where it's like, I could do this because I want to be stretched and I want to grow. But then it's also like, in doing that, I'm going to open myself up to be fully known. And that's terrifying. Yeah. That's terrifying. And throughout, the year that we had together, I started to just really unravel and connect dots on certain things. And I honestly was a sponge, because I'm the only guy that's single in our group. So I am getting like the good, the bad, the ugly, the nitty gritty from everybody. And for me, it was so special because it really just shifted my perspective on so many different things. And to come clean with all these guys about why I struggled with, certain types of pornography, and like where that stemmed from, and kind of getting to the root of that, and then learning what a healthy thought pattern looked like, and identifying the cycles that needed to get put in play, and the action plan. And these guys literally loved me unconditionally in a way that I have never experienced in my life, where it was just met with so much compassion. And there was just so much just joy to like celebrate the fact that there was vulnerability taking place, but also that this part of the story that was resurfaced and dealt with also got rewritten in the process. And to share that with everyone was one of the best things that possibly could have happened for me. And like, best $1,000 I could have ever spent. I say that hands down, like hands down. So yeah, super thankful.
Man, that's just incredible. Well, for starters, I think we'd be missing a real moment here if we didn't do a little shout out to some of the ladies, and just let all the ladies know that the he's available, right? We've got him fairly cleaned up, ladies. He's not domesticated, but he's well groomed. He's well kept. He's got his stuff in order. And so, we'll just throw his phone number up here real quick, Tim, with the 259-558-1276, I think. No, I'm just kidding. That's not really his phone number. But you can send us a DM and we'll hook you up.
I appreciate it. Let's go.
Yeah, no worries. I just love that, dude. And again, it's just another story about, we all have excuses why we're not further along, right? I'm too tired. I don't have the time. It's too much money. We all have excuses and about why we shouldn't start either, right? Like the ultimate truth is, I don't trust myself that I can finish this, that I can really follow through with it. I'm working on that theory, but I think that's a lot of it. And so it's so cool to watch you push through that fear and just kind of buckle down. And I was listening to David Goggins the other day, which I don't know how many of you know David Goggins, but I can't repeat word for word what he said. But he said, when I wake up in the morning and I don't want to get out of bed, he said, I just say to myself, are you going to be a little beep today? Or are you going to get out of bed? And it's just kind of fun, right? Like what it says is, we're all human. we're all human, and we all want to find reasons why to back down, to let off the gas, to just stay average, especially it's like in the fitness world, MJ, I just know that like you're a beast in the fitness world, and right? Like, aren't you a personal trainer?
I am. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's easy to like be really successful in one area of our life, and then just like for that to be the success of your life. Like, I'm a successful man. Like, I'm a businessman. I make a lot of money. Or I'm a successful man. Like, I've got muscles. Or I'm a successful man. Like, whatever, whatever. I make trinkets, and people like the trinkets that I make. But that's not necessarily the sign of success in our life. Like, do you enjoy waking up in your shoes? Can you look yourself in the mirror? Do you feel proud of yourself? And man, just congrats on the hesitation, looking yourself in the mirror and going like, all right, dude, you got to buckle down and really do this. So that's awesome, MJ. Way to go. I love it. Dan, are you the leader of this group originally? And the reason why I'm asking, people are going to be like, gosh, do you not know? Well, there's 3 guys in this group, at least that I know of, that lead other groups. And so, were you the original leader of this group, Dan?
No, actually, MJ is the one that put this whole show together, and Lewis is actually our group guide.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so Lewis, you're the group guide here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a pack of studs here. It's just a freaking 6-pack of studs. Lewis, I just want to talk to you a little bit, because you're the leader, and like, talk me through a little bit what it was like to, lead these guys, and some of the, for you, was it like a really natural thing to just jump in and like, man, I'm going to lead a group of guys through, the challenges that they face. Some of these guys, they had some real problems, right? Like their marriage, Byron's marriage was suffering, and you have William, who like is struggling with some serious sexual stuff, and not serious in the form that like he's acting out or anything like that. Like, I'm not trying to blow it up, but like just the challenges that he faces. And, you have MJ, just being single alone is a pain, like you got to talk to the guy about his single problems. No, I'm just kidding. But, what was it like for you? What were some of the challenges that you faced in being specifically in leading these guys and being a leader? And then kind of like, what were some of the keys and the tips that you used to like help bring the best out of these men?
Absolutely. So in a lot of ways, it was something completely new for me. So I'd never really done anything like this before. And I actually did the BraveCo 12-week challenge, or the 12-week before this ran. We put a bunch of feedback, almost that we wanted something longer. We all did the 5-day, all were killing it.
So I can explain that. Yeah, let me just explain that really quick. Because before we did the 12-month discipleship course, we ran, and before we had the name BraveCo, first it was just like I said, hey, if anybody wants to come on, I'm going to do 10 days of like masculinity stuff. So we did that. Then we ran it back again, and we called it like man-to-man, and like having man-to-man conversations, which you can't keep that name, right? Like, because if you Google man-to-man, that's a real bad thing to do. Like, men, don't do that. And so we realized right away, like you can't call it man-to-man. And, but then when we ran it back, right, we had the name BraveCo and launched and branded and all that. So that's what Lewis is talking about. Then let me just describe the 5-day challenge really quick, because I think probably a lot of guys are like, what was the 5-day challenge? So last year we did these challenges, these free 5-day challenges, and we do 5 nights in a row on Facebook, and any guy could join in. And like I would speak, we bring in all kinds of guest speakers that were awesome. And we just talk about these really powerful topics, like how to break a cycle, or how to work through pain, or whatever, like how to build an incredible life. My dad came on, Kolzik, Greg Hendricks came in there, Steve Weatherford came in. And so those 5-day challenges were freaking awesome. We had thousands of guys on those challenges because, again, they're free. And then after the challenge, after the 5 days, if anyone wanted to sign up and go through our year-long discipleship program, they can do it. So it's kind of a taste of that. So anyways, Lewis, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to give a little bit of context for guys. So you were saying that this was kind of new for you. You hadn't led a group really. So take it from there.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, I was almost discovering my leadership style and how I lead, and really the fact that that's something I really am passionate about and something I really want to do a ton more of. And in some ways, it was a really easy group to lead because they were killing it on the 5 day. Like, these are the men who were showing up the most, which is why we got together. We were like, why would we want to hang out with anyone else when we're kind of going after it? So, we're the best of the best in that kind of 5 day, right? So that's kind of go after it. So in a lot of ways, I had guys who were just instantly out the gate, absolutely running for it. Like session 1, we were already diving into it, really going deep, really didn't have to work at all to really get the vulnerability, get the transparency out there, and to kind of break through a lot of the walls that the misconceptions that we had, and really, learning by leading, and leading by leading, and allowing others to really take that spot in. So we did a rotation. So we had it each week. We had one guy step up, lead, walk through the content. I think actually that was the best way, because it all felt like in our own way, we were all taking turns leading, pushing this thing forwards. We all felt like we had an ownership thing of this. And my leadership style is in a way that I try and empower and equip others rather than trying to kind of do it all. So I think in a lot of ways it was a team effort. Everyone was pushing us forwards. Like some of the times that like Dan, Chris, William, MJ, Byron all led just incredibly in each of the questions they asked, the amount of planning they put into really digging in. And so in a lot of ways, I just remember there was a time on Aaron's Zint's thing where we kind of had to share something like the deepest, darkest secrets, and we kind of just reeled that off, and the things that we'd never shared about to anyone at all. And then like we had like a 5 day challenge. I think it was like the second one we ran like 3 weeks after, and they were like sharing those deepest, darkest secrets as their testimony that they weaponized their story for, to go and kind of say like, come on, like this is what God's done in our lives. This is what the power of what the Lord's doing in this movement. And actually, it's not something that's far off. It's so achievable. This is where I was. And actually just over 2 seasons, like this is where I'm now.
Bro, it's insane. So you brought up something, weaponizing your story, that we've talked about a little bit on the podcast, but where each one of you men had, so when he talks about Aaron Zint, that's phase 2, lesson number 9. Guys, look at how much I have this content in my brain. So yeah, phase 2, which is sexuality and relationships, lesson number 9 is Aaron Zint. And Aaron just friggin' does an incredible job at unpacking the problem behind porn. And one of the things that he's talking about is really drawing a line in the sand and getting out the secrets, right? And part of weaponizing your story is a lot of guys are so afraid to share their past, right? The deepest, darkest things that they've done, because we're so afraid that they're going to get used against us. But what we don't realize is the stuff that we've overcome is now a weapon for us and other men, right? Like that's the fuel that other guys use to get out of their hellhole. And so, when William says, oh man, I was struggling with my same-sex attraction past in living that lifestyle, like there's a guy watching this today that just got a ton of hope and a ton of fuel and is going to run with that and go, okay, I can do it too. Or, when you hear Byron go like, my marriage sucked, I wanted to look at myself in the mirror. I wanted to be proud. I had a conversation with my wife. I got real with a bunch of men. Like somebody's going to be sitting, listening to this podcast and go, okay, I can do that too. That's what we mean about weaponizing your past and weaponizing your story. And ultimately, guys, like that is the call for all of us to take the hardest places in your life, the places where you were most ashamed, the places where you fell, and weaponizing that, right? Like don't hide it. Don't let it define you. You begin to define it. And you go, this is not what makes me ugly. This is what makes me beautiful. This is what makes me powerful, is I am not the sum total of my worst day or my worst moment. My ability to overcome that, gain victory over that is a breakthrough for every person in my life. And so, Man, I love that. And yeah, you guys, I think it's really cool. Taking turns to have each guy lead is awesome. You know, mostly what I wanted to highlight is a lot of guys think that they have to be this freaking type A, like top of the food chain, CEO, prison warden to lead a group of powerful men. And it just couldn't be further from the truth, right? Like it couldn't. And when we talk about leading a group, really, honestly, you're the facilitator of information. Like you're the guy that everyone can count on to make sure that each person, you know, is cared for and that you're on time, that, you know, you're kind of like holding the standard and, you know, you're confronting the dude that doesn't want to talk at all, Byron, and you're stopping the guy that wants to talk all the time, MJ. You know what I mean? Like you're helping to like make sure, and that's leadership. Like if you can do that, it's Jesus with the disciples. It's like he's not stopping them from arguing about who's the greatest. He's just going like, hey guys, if you really do want to be great, like here's how you do it. You know, look, can we just keep moving on here? And so I love that. Anything else? Any other thoughts about that, Lewis?
I think it was probably also just a factor that I was myself going through the content for the first time as well. So in a lot of ways, I was kind of being vulnerable. I was kind of bringing my stuff in a lot of ways. They were feeding into me as much as I was feeding into them. So it was kind of learning to kind of receive and to, in moments of where I am not the leader in that session, it's actually taking my pride and my kind of, because in some ways you can think, well, I'm the leader, so therefore I kind of shouldn't really be as vulnerable. And I think you see this in churches, that we don't really allow our leaders to struggle with porn or struggle with all of these things, because I think, you know, we've talked about it here as well, is, you know, you kind of get kicked out, you kind of lose your position, you don't get to serve in the roles that you want, you don't get the appreciation or recognition or whatever that is. So in a lot of ways, learning that actually this is a safe space to be known and to be fully, with that being met fully with acceptance and love by each of the other guys, was just so life transformative, really.
I love it, man. Yeah, that's powerful. Chris, just share with us a little bit about, you know, how you came into the group, what was going on in your life. Were you the guy that had it all together, or was your life falling apart? And then maybe a little bit about just where you're at.
Definitely not the guy who had it all together by any means. I think that was something that I like to personify, that, you know, that it just kind of came across that way. But man, you pick one of the 4 modules that we worked through, and that was me at a certain time. And, you know, a lot of these other guys too. So that's what made this group so powerful, is these gentlemen all linking arms from the very get-go. Like Lewis said, dude, Jay, these guys dove in head first, no hands, just straight face in the water, man. And then somebody was there to pick them up. So I got a little ahead of myself there, but so definitely not the guy who had it all together. The thing that drew me to this was, man, I was just tired of not meeting my potential. I knew there was something in there, and growing up without a dad, you know, just the world, I think I stole this phrase from you or the team. The world raised me, and they didn't do a very good job. Quite frankly, these guys have helped forge and beat and sharpen and mold me into a much better man, you know, and I feel confident now saying I'm a man because of journeying through the 12 months with these guys.
Wow.
Dude, we had tears on our calls. I mean, we had some fiery prophecy prayers. We were laying hands on each other virtually, healing people. Like, this group was rowdy, and it was a blast. But all of that came about because you had you had guys who were all willing. You know, whether it was finances, which was me, that was my issue. Dude, I struggled. I was like, man, am I going to pay for this? Am I not going to pay for this? How do I do this? And then you straight up called me out on one of your deals. It was like, being a man is about making a decision. And I was like, oh gosh, he knows I'm wavering. He must be looking at my email. And so I swiped the card, like right after that. I was like, no way am I missing this. Now through this, it didn't take me but a couple of sessions to just be hooked to the guys, hooked to the content, and just the belief that, I guess really there was hope. There was hope that I could be different. You know, I could be the man that I saw other men being. I could be that father. I could be that provider. And walking through that with these guys only blue flame or blue air on that flame. You know, it was lit, and then each one of them at different times and various times collectively blew on that for me. But you guys in the content crushed it. I'm so pumped to try to start one locally, especially whenever Lewis gets around. Maybe we can tag team it, but just tons of growth, man. There's no excuses. You know, these guys can say it, your other guys can say it or not, but you know, Jay, if there's no excuses, there's really not. Like, it's that whole extreme ownership thing, man. You want to be better? Time to put in the work. Time to commit. That's it.
Which is, in a lot of ways, is so freeing, right? Like, it's so freeing to know that, listen, honestly, the only thing holding you back is you. And you get all your power back, right? Like, you can get 100% of your power back by going, okay, what am I willing to pay in order to, you know, have more confidence, in order to be able to have a hard conversation with my wife, in order to work through the pain in my life, right? Like, the hardest thing in the world is to not know how to do it. The second hardest thing is to motivate yourself to do it. And, you know, we tried to take all the work out of it with guys by going, here's a path, right? Like, here's a pathway to walking into, you know, confidence and freedom and wholeness and health. Now it's up to you to work together as men, as brothers, in different parts of the way. Like, somebody's going to have to drag you across that line, and somebody's going to have to motivate you, because you don't always feel good and you're not always at your best. And sometimes you get down, and man, I love that, Chris. That's just, it's awesome. I think we have a lot of guys who, are like, man, I don't have the finances to do it. And when we were creating BraveCo, so full disclosure, when we were creating this, I had originally went like, I just want to do like a $10 a month subscription, you know, like Netflix does. And I got a lot of input on it, like, cause it's hard to know what to charge, right? And I had a whole bunch of businessmen and friends, close friends, go, listen, bro, if guys don't put real skin in the game, they're not going to do it. Like, they're going to come in for like one time. As soon as it gets tough, they're going to be like, I'm done. And then secondarily, they're like, we're going to have to fund BraveCo. Cause you know, we spent $120,000 building out our platform that we use. We spent $80,000 filming content because we didn't do a crappy job. Like, we did a really good job. And, you know, and we put a lot of money into, just last year alone, I mean, close to 500,000 just in like operations and making stuff go. So they're like, dude, if you don't charge guys, like, you're not going to be financially stable. But here's the other thing that we did is we didn't leave any guy behind. And you can ask any one of my staff, like, and we always said that, like, listen, if you absolutely cannot afford whatever it was, $1,000 or whatever, like, what can you pay? we'll take your chickens, we'll take your dog. Like you can pawn your bike. No, I mean, we found out what guys could pay and we met them there. And, cause you can call a guy's bluff too on that, right? Like you can call a guy's bluff where it's like, oh man, it's just, I don't have the money, I'd love to do it. And then you're like, okay, well, what do you have? And he's like, oh, I mean, I got $300. You're like, all right, I'll take your $300, And then pretty soon he's like, yeah, I just don't have the time either. And you're like, okay, just tell me that you don't have the courage to do it. Like you just need to be honest with yourself and say, hey, this isn't the right time for me. I don't have the courage to do this right now or whatever. I don't want to do it. That's fine. Like this isn't for every guy. I don't think every guy on the planet has to do BraveCo, but don't lie to yourself. That's the main thing for me is like, don't lie to yourself and rip yourself off from an opportunity that can really benefit you and bring you to a place of health and wholeness. So, Dan, not last, but definitely not least. I just love to talk to you about, what was your experience like in BraveCo? And you've been on just a ton of calls with me and the leader calls. And we spent a lot of time together. I know that you've even, it's fun because I can't remember where you started in. Did you start out being a leader or did you just start out being a guy and then
No, I was just a guy in there and then they opened it up for guides and Lewis volunteered me and I started out as a guide.
Yeah. So maybe just tell us a little bit about your journey, why you joined BraveCo, and then I'm going to open up a few
I
more
actually
things.
got invited to go to the BraveCo conference last year by a friend who didn't end up actually going. And I wasn't going to go. And I ended up, my wife said, hey, you're going out to Bethel to bring my oldest son, Sam, to ministry school. And why don't you go to that conference? I'm like, I don't know, Joy. Like they're talking about like, foundations of masculinity or something. I said, I don't really struggle with my masculinity. I don't know what it's all about, but she's like, no, I think you should look into it. Pray about it. She said, ask the Lord. So I asked the Lord and he said, yes. So I signed up the last hour of the last day that it was available. And man, in that conference, I was in a worship set and they were playing the song, There's Another in the Fire by Hillsong. And I forget what the session was about previously, but the Lord showed me five places in my life, one very specifically, where I was just asking, God, where were you? Where were you when I went through this? And he just showed me, man, he showed me that he was right there alongside me. He put his hand on my shoulder and just said, I love you. This was never my will for you. I love you. And something along the lines of, you're going to have a story out of this. And I remember coming out of that time, man, I was on the ground weeping, and it's not something I do on a regular basis, but it was just so unbelievably powerful. And John Eldridge was also teaching about getting our whole heart back and praying that prayer. Jesus, I want my whole heart back. And that's what I prayed. And I remember getting up from that session, and you guys were talking about this Brave course that was going to be launched. I called my wife. I said, I don't know what just happened here, but this is what I was born for. Wow. And I want to give my life to whatever this is about helping men, about first being healed and whole myself. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit through this. I'll try to run through it quick. I learned that that sobriety wasn't the opposite of addiction. Connection is. So you guys were teaching. And I learned what that connection was. And I've had my relationship with my kids restored. My oldest son, in fact, I had a conversation with him before he started this year in ministry school, and the situation with my daughter, and I was working through some things with my daughter, and he's looking at me like, Dad, how come you don't tell her like this? Like, shut this, like, don't you hear what she's, and I just put my hand up. I'm like, Sammy, I'll talk to you after we're done. And anyway, finished up with my daughter, and I said, son, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, you and your two younger siblings basically had two completely different dads. I said, I never listened to you. I parented you out of fear. And I'm just so sorry. And it actually began another level of restoration, my relationship with him. My daughter had an amazing transformation about 3 months ago. In September. Radically had an encounter with the Lord. She is talking to me. I mean, we're just having an amazing time that we just haven't had in years before that. My youngest son is now a senior. Just have an amazing connection with him. My wife wrote me a letter through this, and we were having a really hard time. And my wife is not a words of affirmation or physical touch person. I am, but that was just something that we'd struggled with in our marriage. And finally, she wrote me a letter, and she said, God created you with something that only he can fill. And he's actually inviting you into that place of healing, the deep wounds that you have wanted me to meet, to heal. Only he can heal. The things that we're struggling with, like, I can never fully meet that. It's only going to be a temporary Band-Aid, and I don't want that, and I know you don't want this. But it comes with entering his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. And your times with the Lord, I believe, are going to be amazing. And he's going to meet you there just like he met me. What you're going through is the same thing that I went through with the inner healing, and I got healed and the Lord met me. So fast forward that, the next 2 weeks I did that. I got up every morning and I'm like, God, I need you. I want to be healed in these areas of my life. You guys, through this course, you taught us how to process pain, how to go through forgiveness, that it's actually, it isn't a matter that we haven't forgiven. It's that we were actually never given permission to process the pain and the wound. And then the forgiveness that came out of that was so complete, where I never had to process those same wounds twice, just like you would explain. 2 weeks later, my wife comes down the stairs and she says, Dan, there is something so unbelievably attractive about you right now. And as we're processing it, we got to a place where she didn't have to be Jesus in my life. I had found my Father. My Heavenly Father met me in those places. So, man, it's been a wild ride, and we're still on the journey. And these guys here, I just want to rip through the screen and give each one of them a hug. And I'm not a virtual platform guy. That was probably the hardest thing for me with the course was, seeing guys through the screen, not be able to put my arm around them and either punch them or, give them a hug. So anyway, that's that.
Gosh dang, dude. What's been so fun is watching you like process through this past year, because we've spent halfway through the year when you became a guide, and then we spent quite a bit of time together because I'm on a once a week call with all of the guys in BraveCo. Whoever wants to jump in can jump in. And then I'm on a once a week call with just the guides, right? So the leaders leading the other guys. And so with the guides, I get really close because there's less of them and they're a little bit more consistent. And you and Lewis and Byron have been on every call, on like almost every call. Like I just know you three are going to be there. And so it's super fun to watch you go all the way through, this whole journey and ask lots of questions and whatever, have good dialogue. But what's been so fun for me too is as I'm watching you guys grow and learn and gain confidence, I'm also watching you like take the content and then go teach it. So I watched you do that this year. Like you took, I think, the forgiveness and working through pain and forgiveness and go and teach that. I watch a couple other guys do that too. Like, hey Jay, is it cool if I take these 2 lessons or whatever, and if I go and teach it here? And it's been so much fun to not just like, cause that's the real deal, right? Like that's when you're actually making a disciple, is you're not just giving somebody content. It's transforming them, body, soul, and spirit. And then it's becoming them, like, right? Like now you're going and giving that away. And it's honestly what I love the most about what we do is like, okay, yeah, get well, get trained, and then go give back. like get activated in what God has for you. And we've been going for almost an hour, so I'm gonna kind of shut this down here soon. Does anybody feel like we left anything out that you want me to hit, or you want me to ask a question, or that I haven't? So you got anything burning inside of you that you're like, man, you better call on me? If not, it's no worries. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything before we move on.
I just want to bring up identity for a second. You know, I didn't catch it the first time we did the 5-day challenge, but when I was getting ready to become a guide for class 3, and Jay, when you taught that lesson on the men need a new name, and that night in the 5-day challenge, I got a new name. You know, it's like us as men, like we go through a lot of our lives where we live by the names the world called us, that we live by the names that we called ourselves. And for me, like, I called myself a loser, worthless, insignificant, like not worthy, you know, not a man. Like these are the names that I was either called or I called myself my entire life.
Wow.
And in that lesson where, you know, the men need a new name, I clearly heard God say, like, Byron, you were Byron the strong, you were Byron the courageous. And I mean, it spoke to me so deeply. I actually went and even got a tattoo about it. Like,
yeah, you did.
like a big one, like it covers most of my arm. And like, you know, because I knew that's who I was deep down inside. I knew that's who I was. And when we start to walk in the identity that God gives us instead of the identity the world gave us, like, it's a game changer. It's a game changer for every man out there. And I just think it's so cool that through BraveCo, so many men are learning who they actually are. That's what I think was one of the most powerful things in BraveCo.
Man, I love that. Yeah, I remember that moment too. And on that 5-day challenge, that was a really powerful night. I think that was the first time I had delivered that message like that. And kind of we came down to the pinnacle of the moment where I talked about the different names, you know, that whatever, if my dad was called, I was called, and then in different places in the Bible, right? And then at the end, we had every guy like sit down and close his eyes and ask God, like, what do you call me? Right? Like, what were the names that you were called, and what do you call me? And man, that was a freaking powerful night. Like, guys started sharing right there. They started sharing, you know, what God called them. Just super powerful. But yeah, it's true. Like, you know, a massive part of getting your life back is getting your identity back, because everything falls in line with that. And yeah, it's incredible. MJ, go for it, man.
Just again, this was just right in my heart as we were just kind of wrapping up here. But I think for anyone else listening to this, I think just for some encouragement and hope, I think the most rewarding thing when we got to the last like week of the 12 months was like our final like meeting. We wrapped up right at the end of November. None of us were the same guys that we were at the start. And I think that's something that people listening need to like be reminded of. Like, if you're willing to put in the work, you will not be the same person you were at the start. And that's the beauty of having your whole story rewritten, right? You have people that are coming alongside you. You have people that are loving you through all of the ish. And like, it's very powerful when you're met with that unconditional love and you find that brotherhood. Like, these guys, I would not have gotten through the last year without these men, like through the prayer, through the tears, the prophetic words, the phone calls. I flew down to Florida to see Dan. Like, it was intentional, but there was something so special in the fact that we all got to celebrate all of the changes we were seeing while it was happening. Because it's so easy to not think that anything's changing while you're in the thick of it, but to have somebody who's in it with you pointing out what they're seeing change, it gives you that momentum to keep pushing ahead and just nudge the needle a little further, which I just think is so powerful.
Man, I love that. Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, guys, once again, like, I just want to congratulate you on, I mean, just taking so much ownership of your life and a job well done. You know, the the first reason we go into this is just such a really selfish reason, which isn't horrible, to see our lives get better and kind of to get rid of this hellish chaos that you live in. But then it quickly turns to like, I want to leave a legacy, like I want to live for a purpose beyond myself. And man, you guys are on that path. I'm watching you do it, each one of you, and watching you guys grow. And so it's just awesome. If you're listening to this and you're going, man, I want this experience. Like I want to be in a brotherhood of men who are fighting for one another, who are laying their lives down, who are growing, who aren't the same, a year later. We have the answer to that. And this year, we really started to kind of pivot and realize, okay, we built out this 12-month process, this discipleship program for men, and we felt like the next mission was to offer it for churches. So not the full 12-month, but 12 weeks. So we took our Foundations of Masculinity, this first 12 weeks, and we've packaged it, including small group curriculum training. So it's all videoed. There's 4 activations that get you outside of like the classroom and outside and into the woods or wherever your wilderness is, even if you live in the city, up on a skyscraper, if that's your mountain, and kind of really activated with God. And then you also will get access to me. So once a month, you'll be able to jump on. And if you're a church leader, you can jump on with me, ask me any questions you want, which I think Byron and Dan and all these guys would say like, that was helpful, that was valuable. And then for every man that is in your church that's going through the Foundations of Masculinity, they'll also be able to jump on, ask any questions they want. Struggling with my marriage, dealing with anxiety, stuck in porn, need some help here, need some tips. And we help to answer those questions. And again, create like a greater community of men that are all running towards something. So, these guys had each other, but they also had other men all year long that they were partnered up with, which really helps. And so, that 12-week curriculum, the Foundations of Masculinity, will be available at the end of this month. You can literally go to braveco.org. There's a section there just for churches. So if you're a church pastor, or if you want to get this into your church and go through the Foundations of Masculinity, you can just send that to your pastor, fill out the information. We personally meet with the church leaders. We do it over Zoom, find out how we can best help you and how we can equip you, and we can do that. If you're just a dude, you're like a Byron or a Lewis or MJ or William, and you're like, man, I want to go through something like this. What we have for you is we have, again, the Foundations of Masculinity, that first 12 weeks that you can get with a group of your guys that you already have. And what I love about Lewis's story is like, he wasn't the strongest guy in the room in every area. He didn't have every place of his life figured out. He was just willing, right? So he was the guy that was willing to step up and say, I'll be responsible for facilitating this content and this relationship. And it's just such a testimony, right? Like you can, if you've got a couple of guys, you can band together once a week, watch a 38 to 45 minute long video, spend a little bit of time, an hour talking about it with one another, do that 12 weeks. You guys can, again, jump on a Zoom with all the other guys, ask me questions. You can still meet with all the other guys online. And at the end of 12 weeks, like you won't be in the same spot as where you started. Now, the only way you could be that is if you don't actually put any effort into it, but you won't. If you walk all the way out the 12 weeks, you're going to continue to grow. And what I loved too about Dan is Dan said, like, my masculinity is sound. I don't know that I need to go to a conference to learn about masculinity. And Byron had probably just said the same thing, right? Like, I can bench 5,000 pounds. What do I need to? I'm a power lifter. And that's our ego, man. That's our ego. That's our ego trying to, and that ego keeps us ill-equipped, right? It keeps us paralyzed in the places that we really want to grow. And so, don't let your ego get in the way of going, man, I really want to have a group of guys. Like, I think a lot of men are going to listen to this and go, dang, I wish I was a part of group 32. Like, I wish that I could have joined. And that's the truth. We all want that. But the truth is, guys, like, You can create that in the group that you have. You can create that. Like these guys didn't even know each other. They had never even met each other before our 5-day challenge, where they all went, hey, let's be in a group together. They're all from different cities. You guys don't live in the same city. Hopefully people caught that. Different backgrounds. And they just went, hey, let's be intentional for a whole year. Listen, if a bunch of guys can do that, who've never shared a meal together in the same exact place, like you can take your friends, get on the same path and go, let's do this. So we have that available for you guys too. That's coming at the end of this month, early next month, that will be launched. You can actually get access to it now, but we're making the package better. So we're giving you a whole bunch of extra stuff there. So hopefully this was super beneficial for you guys. Men, thank you so much again for your time. You guys you're honestly the favorite part of my week is jumping on, being with you guys. And I just feel so much gratitude in my heart, for all the stuff that we've been through together, just the highs and the lows, and watching you guys, take ownership of your life. And honestly, man, it's just so humbling. I've watched Tim cry over here twice now. And it's just, we're both filled with gratitude, right? Of getting to be a part of, man, just a bunch of honestly brave guys who are willing to step up. And so we want to invite everyone else into the community. You don't have to watch our videos or whatever. You can simply just join us, subscribe to our podcast. I mean, that helps move the needle, right? Share what we're doing. Pray for other men. You can sow into us financially. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. I haven't taken a salary from BraveCo at all. Not that I never will. But literally, like, if you want to sow into what we're doing, you can do that. Men's lives are getting changed, transformed, and we are changing the narrative on men and equipping men to take back their lives. So that's it for this week's podcast. Stay brave out there, and hopefully we meet together while you guys are going through the foundations of masculinity for yourself. Be blessed, guys. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.